I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual.
起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated. So back to 11. I've prepared quite a bit of discussion to really drive home the point. It's quite possible that you may hear reiteration of concepts that we have covered previously, and that's only because I feel they are so important that they bear repeating. So with chapter 11, we started out looking at the overall chapter, identifying the structural distinctions that identify the sections. So just to kind of jog everyone's memory, here's what we did. We identified the characters that are similar, that are the same, from line to line. And we identified that 2, 4, and 6 have quite a few similar, identical characters. So those characters are translated exactly the same way into English. So the English words are also highlighted, so you can see visually the section. The top section is the AB structure, and the bottom section is just the conclusion. So last time, we went through the 3 different examples. The 6 lines are 3 different examples with the wheel, the container, and a room. And we went through them to talk about the underlying meaning and also the point that it makes, that it's okay to have something, it's good to have something, but you need emptiness in that something in order to use it. And it's the same for the wheel, as it is for a cup, like a vessel, as it is for a room. So this is where we are at the last line of the 3 different examples. So today, we're just going to be focusing on the last 2 lines. Now, even though they seem very simple, just a few characters, just to translate it into 2 lines, they seem pretty simple in meaning, but actually they do hide a great deal of complexity that we will explore and unravel 1 layer at a time. So they say, therefore, that which exists is used to create benefit, that which is empty is used to create functionality. Like I said, simple lines. So what can we say about them? Well, it turns out quite a bit. First, I want to talk about the whole idea of emptiness. And no discussion on emptiness is complete without us engaging in a discussion about 空谈. So let me explain these 2 characters. So in Pinyin, it's K-O-N-G, but it's not pronounced like Kong, like King Kong. It's Kong with an O sound. So that's one of the peculiar aspects of the Pinyin system. And then the second character, Tan, so pretty much like Tan. So Kong Tan. Literally, what they mean, the 2 characters, the first one, Kong, means empty. The second one, Tan, means talk. So together, empty talk. What is empty talk? Empty talk means philosophical notions that may be interesting to contemplate, but have little or no practical value. So it's the equivalent of poses in a particular form of martial arts that serve no practical value but look really good, look really cool, excellent for movie posters, but you wouldn't be posing all day long when you're in actual combat. So to illustrate the idea of 空谈, there is a long-standing tradition in both Buddhist philosophy and Taoist thought about emptiness and also about the trap of empty talk that can result. So to illustrate that, what I've done is that I have a story in the Tao of Success about emptiness and about empty talk. The story features two particular characters. It's a simple story. And so let me explain what they are, and let me also explain the characters. The first character in the story is 铁周, and then 和尚. I'll explain that in just a moment. 铁周, and this is how it's written now. 铁 means iron. 周 means a small boat or a canoe. So think of it as iron boat or iron vessel. He is a young monk. And then another character, a much older monk, 杜元和尚. So Du 杜元. So before we get into the story, let me just explain these characters briefly. You're going to notice that in the Chinese characters, you're going to see the same characters repeated here. The two characters here and the two characters here are the same. That's because these are the two Mandarin characters meaning monk. So think of these as just monk. Therefore, the two characters in front of that are the name of the monk, and it's a Buddhist name. When someone becomes a monk in Buddhism, they are supposed to renounce everything, all of their worldly possessions, including their worldly titles, not just their possessions, but also their position. Their previous life is discarded, including their previous identity. So their Buddhist master would give them a Buddhist name. So this particular monk, the young monk, has 铁周 as the name, the iron vessel. Whereas the older monk, when he became a monk, he was given the name 杜元. So both of these names have heavy connotations. In Buddhism, they are unmistakably Buddhist. In Buddhism, it is often said that one's duty, the duty of a sentient being, is to help other sentient beings to reduce their suffering, to provide them a path to salvation. The metaphor that is most often used is that the suffering that all sentient beings must go through is likened or compared to or described as an ocean. So it's an ocean of bitterness and suffering and human misery. When you are ignorant, when you are unenlightened, you are drowning in such an ocean. So to be able to help someone, to be able to study the sutras of Buddhism is like having a vessel, having a small boat, so that you can float above the ocean of bitterness and suffering and human misery. So when you have a boat, that's what the first monk's name is referring to. It's not just the boat, but an iron boat, which is a reference to his determination to remain on the path of the Buddha, to study the sutras, his determination to seek not just personal salvation, but also utilize the boat to help other people. For instance, he will sail to where other people are drowning and then help them into the boat so he can carry them, he can ferry them to the opposite shore of enlightenment. That act to ferry someone is 渡. So it's this character here, 渡, is to ferry someone across. So then yuan, the second character here, what it means is karmic affinity. So it's no accident who we come across in life. The people that we interact with, people we talk to, the people with whom we discuss spiritual teachings, teachings that can help in terms of enlightenment. So those are karmic affinities described by this character Yuan. So fairy affinity, it means the connection, the personal connection we all have, that we come across one another, we interact, we talk about spirituality, and we can help one another, and we ferry one another, so to speak. So it's a name that also has a lot to do with Buddhism. So when you have a background in Chinese culture and Buddhist teachings, you only have to look at these names to automatically understand that these names can only belong to someone in the Buddhist tradition. So as our story opens, once upon a time, in ancient China, there was a young monk by this name, Tiezhou. This young monk was known as a prodigy, being quite young, but he was already very well studied in the Buddhist sutras. He was very diligent. He memorized all the sutras he could find. He gained a reputation for that. So then he went on a trip to visit the most famous temples in order to meet the renowned Zen masters of his time. So he told everybody that, well, I'm visiting all these renowned Zen masters for the purpose of seeking additional understanding to refine the understanding that I currently possess. So one day, his journey took him to an ancient temple where he saw this much older monk, Du Yuan monk, Du Yuan和尚. So wishing to impress the old man, the young monk went up to him and began to intone what he felt was his greatest insights. He said, the Buddha, the people, indeed everything, all is emptiness. Then he paused and waited for a reaction. But then the old monk said nothing. So the young monk thought, he's probably stunned into being completely speechless by my wisdom. So feeling rather encouraged, he continued. He continued to intone. He said, the essence of the present moment is also empty. There is nothing. There is no understanding. There is no confusion. There is no sage. There is no commoner. The essence of the entire world is nothing but emptiness. Then he paused again and he smiled, like, attaboy, that was good. I did good. He was satisfied to have delivered such a perfect pearl of wisdom. So perhaps because of his satisfaction, he did not expect it when the old monk, Du Yuan, suddenly came out with a bamboo stick and whacked him over the head. So surprised and hurt, ouch. He's like, hey, what did you do that for, you rude old monk? What is wrong with you? And the older monk, Du Yuan, replied with calmness and amusement. He said, well, if all is emptiness, then pray tell, what is the source of your anger? Is your anger not also empty? All right, so let me explain the story, but first, let me check with everyone on the audio quality. Are there audio breakups? Am I being heard? And I'm gonna check with Mark on that. Let me pause for a moment so I can check with him. And let me also put the same question to everybody as far as audio. If there are breakups, I will switch over to cell phone. Okay, audio is great. Okay, audio good, excellent. Yeah, over here on my side, once in a while, I will see a warning, a pop-up warning from GoToMeeting that I've lost the network connection or I've lost the audio. So that's the reason why I need to ask that question. Okay, so let's delve into the story. Let's talk about what it means. So as I mentioned just a little while ago, this talk of emptiness, the essence of emptiness, it's got a very long tradition in Buddhist thoughts, Buddhist teachings, and also it's an area of focus for Tao sages as well. Tao sages recognize emptiness as nothing less than the essence of existence. So if that is the case, then my question to everyone is, it's an authentic teaching, then why did the old monk hit the young monk over the head with a bamboo stick? Did he feel that it was wrong? Was he disagreeing? Was he expressing his disapproval? Did he maybe not understand what emptiness really means? So the answer is that the older monk is not disagreeing, is not disapproving. What he was doing was he was actually trying to elevate the younger monk's understanding to the next level. What is that? Well, it's something that the Buddha himself would have understood. The idea is that we can make all the observations we want about the nature of the world, the reality and existence being empty, but it doesn't do us any good unless we understand it enough to apply it in some way. So it's great that you're making these proclamations about emptiness, but what do you do after you're done proclaiming? That is the question. So that is the emphasis of the older monk on the practical aspects of the teaching is exactly the same as the practical nature of the Tao. So the Tao teachings includes specific instructions on utilizing the concept of emptiness in specific ways. In this particular chapter, it is stated that emptiness is what provides usefulness or functionality. So that's what this chapter is trying to talk about, is that, okay, great, it's empty. Now let's figure out how to use it. Not just everyday objects like the wheel, like a container or a room, but your life. Your life is a thing too. Its essence is empty. Now that emptiness gives your life its usefulness. What is the usefulness? What is the equivalent of your life's purpose compared to that of a wheel, a container, or a room? So let's go ahead and explore that just a little bit more. Now, in a moment, I'm going to talk about this phrase called 借假修真, to borrow the unreal or the empty to cultivate what is real. So that will be the usefulness of emptiness. But 空谈, empty talk, I feel compelled to give a couple of examples so everyone will know what I'm talking about. One example is the both sides argument. You hear this a lot, especially nowadays, and I'm not going to identify the size of the arguments. I would only refer to side A, side B, and you can draw your own conclusions as to what those are. I just want to get the basic idea across. So side A, side B, side 1, side 2, same thing. So if one side is guilty of a particular thing, the apologists or defenders of that side will often say, well, but look at you guys, side B does the exact same thing. So both sides are equally guilty is the whole idea. So why is that an example of empty talk? Well, because you can say that exact thing about most conflicts. No matter what it is, no matter what the bone of contention is for the two sides, you can say, well, both sides are guilty of the same thing, so it makes the statement not mean much. It dilutes the meaning of the statement until it's pretty much useless. And it can create the illusion of equality between the two sides. Both sides are the same, they're equal. Now, the astute, the clever students, upon looking at this, will then say that, well, if the lesson in this particular chapter is to utilize emptiness, then what is the usefulness of empty talk? Great question. The usefulness of empty talk is that the Tao cultivator will skillfully utilize that emptiness to explore the next level. The next level is to delve into proportionality. Sure, both sides are the same. That's true for just about any conflict where there are two sides. Now, what is the proportionality? Are you saying that it's 50-50? Very unlikely. In this reality, in the world, we have this illusion of symmetry, but that's only in the mind. So in the actual world, symmetry almost never exists. So if you think about night and day, well, depending on where you happen to be in a given year, chances are very good that one is longer than the other. The night is longer than the day, or daytime is longer than night. So it's only a couple of days out of the entire year, out of 365 days a year, where day and night are of equal duration, 12 hours each. Rest of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, it's unequal. It's not the same. If you move further up north or very close to the South Pole, the Antarctica, you will quickly discover that the variation is even more drastic, that you can literally have like 1 hour of daytime and 23 hours of nighttime, and vice versa, when you get close to the North Pole. So recognizing that in nature, asymmetry rules. If you look at a human being, there is the illusion of bilateral symmetry. 2 arms, 2 legs, face, 2 eyes, nose in the middle. But if you look closer, well, chances are pretty good that the two sides are not exactly symmetrical. That, most people have a little bit of a difference between the right side and the left side, which is the reason why when you take a photograph, people will say, well, this side, this side, And if you look even deeper into the human body, you realize that the heart is not dead center to the body, it's off to one side, mostly to the left, but there are exceptions. There are a rare number, a very small number of people with a rare condition where the heart is on the right side. But it's one or the other. There's nobody with the heart right in the center. So in nature, symmetry is the illusion, asymmetry is the rule. So in the two sides, it's probably not 50-50, it's probably more like 40-60, 30-70, 20-80, etc. So when you have an understanding of the proportionality, you put things into perspective. You naturally don't want to assume automatically that both sides are exactly the same. That is the illusion. That's a debating trick, actually, to create the illusion of false equivalence. So that's how you utilize that particular 空谈. So there's another example of 空谈 that's coming up, and I will save that for until after the break. All right, so it's time to continue. It's 11:34. So let me do that. Let me talk about another example of 空谈. Here we go. Here's my second example, that you can never be 100% certain argument. And this, again, this applies to everything. How do you know? How do you know that for sure? How do you know that for a fact? Well, you can't be 100% sure. So because you can say that about pretty much anything, it's become meaningless. So the example that I would provide you with is, well, it's getting close to, we're getting into the holiday season now. So let me use Santa Claus as my example. And this comes from an author that I was reading about recently. And what he said is that, well, it's useless to say that you can never be 100% certain about anything, because there's, as an example, we don't know with 100% certainty that Santa Claus is not living in the North Pole. Maybe he's just really good at hiding. He's got a facility in the North Pole that is well hidden, so we can't find him. So likewise, to know does not imply knowledge. So I'm pretty comfortable with the idea that there's no Santa Claus. I'm comfortable with that for myself. And I'm pretty certain that there's no Santa Claus, even though I've never been to the North Pole. I never actually investigated every inch of the North Pole. Now, if Santa were to land on my roof, I will change my mind and believe. But until that day, to me, Santa is a myth. So the way that the Tao cultivator would make use of this particular type of 空谈 is to use the Yin and Yang symbol as a reminder that there's no perfect knowledge. What I mean by that, if you look at either half of the Yin and Yang symbol, you see a little bit of the opposite. So in the Yin half, there's a dot of Yang. In the Yang half, there's a dot of Yin. So the idea being conveyed in that symbol is that nothing is 100% pure, nothing is 100% perfect. Everything contains a little bit of impurity. So when that is the case, you still need to, your recognition is that you still need to do the best you can with the information that you currently possess. So you proceed in that fashion, just as I do, proceed with the idea that there's no Santa Claus. So yet another example, we were talking about simulation, living as part of a computer simulation just now. You guys may recall that before the hiatus, I actually showed you guys a slide, this one. When we were first touching on the concept of emptiness, I showed this particular slide, and here we have an image from the movie Matrix. So in that movie, Matrix, the story is that all life is part of a computer simulation that's fed into our brains by sentient machines. Now, because we don't know everything in this universe, we cannot mathematically prove that 100% certainty the movie is false. Someone can always come by and say that, well, you don't know that. There's a there's a small chance, 0.001% probability that the movie is actually true. Now, I can bring Keanu Reeves to your living room to tell you that, listen, that's a movie that, I was reading off a script, I was acting in that movie, I can actually dodge bullets, I can actually fly like I do in the movie, so it's just fiction. Now, I can also bring the screenwriters, and they can sit down and tell you that, listen, it's a story that we made up. Even if I did that, you could still say, but you see, they are part of the simulation. Therefore, you cannot disprove it. You cannot be 100% certain. Despite that, nobody would say that they were only kind of sure, fairly sure, pretty sure that the Matrix was fiction. They know it's a movie. They would commit to knowing that it's not true, even though nobody knows everything in the universe. So that's what we have to do as Tao cultivators as well. We have to take the best of our understanding and proceed from there. So that's how we utilize that particular bit of content. Let's move on. Now we get to this particular phrase, and let me do a quick check on audio quality here. Oh, looks like audio faded out. So let me ask everybody this question: should I be dialing in on the cell phone? Okay, well, for some people, audio's good. So I'll tell you what, if audio continues to be spotty, I will bring out the cell phone and dial in. Occasionally, people lose audio because of a connection not on my end or the server side, but on the client side. So let's continue like this until the problem gets really severe. And the opposite could also happen, and that is it could totally clear up, and we have perfect audio to the end of this meeting. All right, so let's talk about these 4 characters. What do they mean, and how can we utilize this particular teaching? So first, let me show you the pinyin. The actual sound that we make is 借假修真. So pinyin looks like this, but sounds more like 借假修真. What does it mean? Here's the literal translation. First character means to borrow. Second character means the fake, the phony, the illusory, the unreal. The third character, that's the character for cultivation. So cultivate, a verb. And then the last character is the opposite of the second character. It means the real, the true. So overall, it says that we borrow the false or the unreal in order to cultivate the real or the true. So here's a rough translation for that. Utilize the unreal to cultivate the real. What does it mean? Well, it means we use the illusory material world to cultivate the real essence, the soul. So, and there's a little bit more Chinese to go, but let me make my remarks on the illusory material world versus the real essence, the soul. So, for those of you who are new to the concept, let me just explain briefly why in Buddhist teachings the material world is regarded as unreal or illusory. It has to do with impermanence or transience. That is, all material things, no matter what it is, it comes and goes. Therefore, it is no more real than the flame of a candle that will be snuffed out after only a short time. So human life is lasting only 70, 80, 90, 100 years. So After that, it's gone like the candle flame. So nothing that we see in the world, even though we can touch them, they have weight, they have substance, they don't last either. A lot of times we grab hold of something, we lose them after a while. And even when it's something that lasts longer than a human being, like a building, a car, or some other object, in the course of time, when you give it enough time, when you give it thousands of years, a building will crumble, as an example. So in the perspective, in the cosmic perspective of millions of years, billions of years, something that lasts hundreds of years is only an eye blink. Therefore, to the Buddhists, everything that we see in the material world is ultimately unreal, because it's all going to be gone ultimately, even though we can, at the moment, we can touch it and feel it. Now, conversely, all the things that we can't touch, like love, like friendship, like connection that we have, the sense of happiness or joy that we experience, those things we cannot touch, those are intangibles. But if the things we can touch are ultimately unreal, then the flip side must also be true. The things we cannot touch, the intangibles, they must be ultimately real. So the essence of you as an individual, your individuality, the you-ness, the ineffable you that I can't really explain, but that you know it's there because you experience it every instant. Well, that's real. I can't touch it, but it's real. Your body, I can touch, but that's going to go away. But the essence of you, that will be everlasting. So that's the difference between the unreal and the real. So the more important thing is the real, the things that we cannot touch. So this phrase down here is a further elaboration on the simple phrase of utilizing the unreal to cultivate the real. So let me explain. First two characters, you'll notice that the first character here is the same as the first character here. They mean the same thing. They mean borrow. The second character is difference, and that means image. Specifically, it means the image of the material world. So it's basically saying you want to borrow in order to utilize the image of the material world in order to do these two things. Then you've got break through the image. The literal translation is break image. It means you want to break through or transcend the image of the material world. It's only when you do that, only then can you, the last two things here, can you clearly understand the Tao. So the second from last character means clear. The last character, li. It means rationality or reasoning. It's, in this context, it is synonymous with the Tao. The Tao is built upon reasoning and rationality. So what the whole thing is saying is that you, all of us, living in the material world, we're borrowing, we're utilizing the image of the material world, everything that we can touch, we can see, we can hear, we can sense. We want to utilize all of them in order to transcend them, the image of the material world. That is how we can clearly understand the Tao. The Tao that's based on rationality and reason. So if you don't want to remember all that, just stick to the first one. Borrow or utilize the unreal to cultivate the real. Or use the illusory material world to cultivate the real essence, the soul. So that's what we do. And this is true regardless of which spiritual path you follow. Whichever wisdom tradition happens to be your path, you are utilizing the material world in order to further the purpose of the soul. Indeed, here we have Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He is a philosopher and priest from turn of the century. And he expressed the same idea in English. So it's another way for me to know that this concept is actually universal. Whether Eastern or Western, the idea is the same. He's the person who first quoted this phrase. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So the essence of ourselves are spiritual beings. We're here having a human experience, utilizing this material body, this biological body, interacting with all the material things, and interacting with other biological entities, people that we can see and feel and touch, converse with. It's all to further the purpose of spirituality. So whether East or West, concept is the same. So having talked about that, let's continue on. I think we're now ready to break down the last two lines and to explain the meaning of the last two lines. So let's do it in sort of a methodical way. I will talk about the last two lines first in terms of the characters, and then applying them to the examples that you see here, and then applying them to life, your life, my life, everyone's life, and then to our purpose, living this particular existence in this particular material world. So in that sequence, let's proceed. First, looking at the last two lines, I want to focus on the first character of the last two lines, or the first character of line 7. This character is gu. So pinyin is gu, so that's pretty close. Gu. It means thus, therefore, so. It's okay to translate as any one of these. They would all mean the same thing. So if you disregard gu, the character, and look at the rest of the line, and then compare that to line 8, you can shift line number 8, one character to the right, and reveal the structural correspondence between these two lines. Looking at what we have up here, you can tell that the third character corresponds to the second character, the fourth character corresponds to the third character, and so on. It's a little bit easier when I show it like this. When I line them up in this fashion, with gu in front of it, with indentation down below, now looking at the Chinese characters visually, you can see that the three middle characters are in fact the same. They're identical. So there's also poetic correspondence on the characters to the left and the characters to the right. So disregard the middle characters for temporarily, just for the time being. Taking a look at the characters from on the left side of it, you, wu. I'll talk about these characters in just a moment. First, the three characters in the middle are the same. To the left, you've got the character for having and not having. So it makes sense from a poetic correspondence point of view. Now, it's a little bit different on the right-hand side. You've got benefit here and functionality here. It's not benefit and lack of benefit. It's benefit and functionality. So now, let me explain. We'll focus on you, the character for having, and then li, the character for benefit. You can also use a translation like value instead of benefit. So looking at the character for you, pinyin looks like this, Y-O-U, and you would probably think that it sounds like you, but it really sounds like yo with an O sound. The definition is to have having, there is, there are. So the meaning is that in this context, having something points to existence. If you have something, it exists. So it's something that has material substance. Now let's explore Li, benefit. Pinyin is simply ally, and the meaning is that when you have something, for something to exist is a benefit for human beings living in the material world. So what that means is that this entire line, that which exists is used to create benefit. This line and the line below form a yin and yang complementary duality pair. So line 7 is the yang side of the yin and yang symbol. Okay, so you can guess what's going to be line 8. It will be the yin side. So let's kind of let's work our way there. First, we have a character wu, and that character means to not have, to lack, to have none. So to lack something points to the emptiness of it, the lack of substance, that it's not there, that you don't have it. And then the last character, yong. Pinyin is Y-O-N-G, but it sounds like the O sound, yong. It means to use or to utilize. So the lack of something, far from being a disadvantage, is what gives everything usefulness. So in the yin and yang symbol, this line is the yin side in that equation, the yin side in the yin and yang symbol. So now we've got yin below, yang above. What's next? Well, let's explore benefit versus functionality. When we apply it to this particular chapter, the 3 examples that were given at the beginning of the chapter are the wheel, the container, and a room. So it's a good thing to have them. It's a benefit to have them. It adds value. Now let's take a look at yong, utilization. There's more to it than just having it. You must also be able to use it. Otherwise, why even have it at all? For people who are shopaholics, one big problem that they have that is contrary to the Tao is that at a certain point of shopping addiction, you guys know this to be true, you probably know people like this, it is more important to have something than to actually use it. So I know that in my much younger days, in my dating life, I had a girlfriend for whom it was much more important to have a closet full of shoes than to actually wear any of the shoes. So it has to be, and that's a problem. That's contrary to the Tao. In accordance with the Tao, you gotta have it, but you also gotta use it. You must have both the yin and yang. So with the wheel, the usefulness of the wheel is to rotate so the carriage can go forward. The usefulness of a container is that it's got to have that emptiness so it can hold water, tea, wine, etc. So the usefulness of a room is for you to be able to access that space to work, to rest, perhaps to sleep. Another utilization for a room, another usefulness for the room is as storage, that you can use it to store and keep various items. Perhaps it's a pantry. So there you go. That's the distinction between benefit and utilization or functionality. Now, I want to encourage everyone to think beyond the examples given in this chapter and to apply the same two duality, the same two sides of the duality to life itself. So, benefit, it's good, beneficial, it's a positive thing to have life in the material world. It's a good thing for you to have your life. Otherwise, you would not be listening to me right now. Now, what about the utilization? What about the other part of it? Well, so let's think about this. If there's a lack of emptiness, if there's not enough emptiness, if there's clutter in your life, it will tend to obstruct the functionalities, the usefulness of your life. Because you got too much stuff. You can't get things done. So the more clutter you have, the more obstructions you have, and the less functionality you can get out of life itself. And that makes sense. So this particular chapter is not just about those everyday objects like the wheel, the cup, the room. It's also about life. And what if you have more emptiness instead of more clutter? Well, then there's more room, there's more freedom. More possibilities, which equals more exploration, more experiences, more discoveries. So generally speaking, it means more ability for you to make better use of your life. Gotta have room. You gotta have room in which to maneuver. You gotta have room in which to move. So that's life. So let me further ask the question about the purpose of existence, the reason why you are in this world interacting with other sentient beings. So it's related to living life free from clutter, but it's a little bit different. So here we go. It's good, beneficial, to have an existence in the material world to interact with other beings, your friends, your family, people you work with, people you know. What about functionality? How will you use your existence? What is the purpose? Why interact with other people? Why have that ability at all? What is the usefulness? Well, here we go. Here's one possible answer that I will suggest to everybody. You wanted to learn, or even just listen. And you can't listen without learning a few things. What you need is receptivity. What is receptivity? It's like the empty cup. There's some degree of emptiness. Like the cup has to be empty to receive fresh tea. Your mind has to be empty of preconceptions, self-centric or egocentric notions, and also empty of distractions. So far, so good, everybody? I think everyone's following the flow of these ideas. And furthermore, I am not hearing any more breaks in the audio or the network connection. So I think that's a very good sign. So one more slide, and then I want to illustrate with another story. So here's the bottom line. In life, in your life, my life, everybody's life, the skillful cultivator of the Tao will always make use of emptiness in myriad ways. And I want to use this slide as an opportunity to reiterate and to remind everybody that the primary realization is that emptiness need not be lack of insufficiency. It can be seen as more space, greater latitude, liberty, etc. And this is the point that I want to use a story to illustrate. So the bottom line is that when you have the room to breathe, to be yourself, to stretch out, to relax, to express yourself, that's when you can start appreciating emptiness more and more. All right, so on that note, I want to share a story with everybody that relates emptiness to freedom, to contentment. So it's a little bit involved and it hasn't been published yet, so I'd like to ask everyone to follow the story closely to be able to get the meaning of all the symbols that are fused into the story. So once upon a time in ancient China, there was a villager who came to the sage for help. He said, "Master, I wish to cultivate the Tao just as you have taught us. So I am in my house and I'm trying to read up on the sutras that you have told us to read. But I feel so depressed. I cannot cultivate. You must help me." So the sage says, "Why do you feel that way?" And the villager says, "Well, Master, I am a poor man. So when I'm in my house, I look around, I just don't have a whole lot of possessions. It reminds me of all the good things in life that I lack, and that makes me depressed. I am so depressed that I cannot concentrate on my learning. So Master, please help me." So the sage says, "Well, I can help, but you must promise to do exactly what I tell you to do." And the villager says, "Master, of course I will do that." But the sage insists and says, "Well, even if what I tell you to do may not seem to make a whole lot of sense, are you still willing to do that?" So the villager swore up and down that he would follow the instruction from the sage to the letter. So the sage found the oath of obedience satisfactory and decided to proceed. So the sage asked, let me ask you a question. How much cattle do you possess?" And the villager says, "Well, as I mentioned, Master, I am a poor man. I own 1 cow, 1 chicken, 1 goat, and that's it." So the sage says, "Well, good. That will be sufficient. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home and I want you to bring all your cattle, all your animals into the house to live with you. I want you to do that, and then I want you to come back in 3 days to tell me how things went." So the villager is completely puzzled. What does living with animals have to do with depression? But he swore the oath of obedience. So he decided that he should go home and follow through. He went home, brought in all the barnyard animals into the house, lived for 3 days. So 3 days later, he showed up at the sage's house. He looked like a wreck. He said, "Master, your plan did not work for me at all. There's a lot of dirty stuff in my house now. There's all this smell. I am constantly worried about running over or stepping on the chicken. So, Master, I can't live like this." And he looked like such a wreck. The master could see that this was true. So the sage told him, "Very well, what I want you to do is go home, let the chicken out into the yard, but keep the other two, the cow and the goat, still in the house, live like that for 3 days, and then come back and tell me how it goes. So again, the villager obeys, goes home, does exactly what he's told. 3 days later, he came back to the sage's house, and he looks like he's ready to collapse. He looks like he's on the verge of tears. And he says, Master, your solution did not work at all. I let the chicken out, but I discovered that the chicken was not the biggest problem. The biggest problem for me was actually the cow. The cow doesn't look so big when it is in my yard, but inside my home, it is humongous. It takes up all the room. I can't do anything without working my way around the cow. I can't live like this. So then the sage says, okay, in that case, what I want you to do is to go home, let the cow out into the yard, and live only with the goat. Can you handle it? So the villager is like, okay, I will do that. I really need to do that. So he goes home, does exactly as he's told. 3 days later, he came back. And he says, Master, that also did not work. The goat has developed a taste for paper. So the sutra that I want to read, the notes that I want to take, nothing is safe from the goat. It just finds it and chews it right up. I can't live like this, you know. So the sage says, well, then you'll be glad to hear that you have only one last step to go through. I want you to go home, let the goats out so that all the barnyard animals are out of your home, live like that for 3 days, come back and tell me how it goes. This is the last step. So at this point, the villager no longer questioned anything. He just wanted to get this over and done with. So he goes home, lets the goat out, and 3 days later, he came back. This time, instead of looking like a wreck, looking like he's almost on the verge of tears, ready to collapse, at the end of his wits, he is beaming with happiness. He is smiling with joy. And he says to the sage, Master, finally it worked. I have my home all to myself. And I can feel so much more happiness than before. And the sage says, but wait a minute, you look around and you see a lot of emptiness in your home and it makes you depressed, right? How do you feel now? Any differently? So it took a while for the villager to think about this question, to consider how he feels, and finally he answers. He says, Master, now when I look around my home, rather than to see the lack or insufficiency of not having enough, what I see now is the space, the emptiness that is appropriate to my needs, the space in which I can cultivate exactly as you have taught us. So that is the story of emptiness and contentment as it applies to the villager. Now you may be wondering, what's that got to do with modern life? After all, we're not likely to bring in barnyard animals into our living spaces. So what is the point of the story if it's not something that will ever happen to us? Well, the point is that this story, like all great Tao stories, work only on the level of symbols. So the cow isn't really a cow, the chicken isn't really a chicken, and the goat isn't really a goat. They all stand for different things. We would never let animals, most of us would never let animals into the house, into the living room, the living spaces. The cattle, they belong outside. And yet, we don't hesitate to bring things into our lives, into the mind, into our homes. So that that deserves some exploration, that deserves some consideration. For example, the chicken stands for distractions. All the things that from our original purpose. So there are plenty of examples. You may, for instance, decide to go online to look up information, but then before you know it, you're checking your email, you're checking social media for messages, postings from your friends, you're looking into viral videos, maybe of cats playing piano or something like that. You've been distracted. The chicken has gotten loose in your mind. And yet another example is that you may want to clean up around the house. You may want to sort things out a little bit, but then you get distracted by some printed material, perhaps a brochure. It catches your attention, you look at it, and the information that's on it leads you to want to look at a magazine, which perhaps in turn makes you want to look at a book. So before you know it, you've been distracted again by the chicken. Not a literal chicken, but a chicken that's running loose in your mind. What about the cow? Well, the cow isn't really a cow. The cow can stand for anything that's taking up way too much space. In the home, it can manifest as physical clutter. So you can look at, for instance, some of these reality TV programs and see hoarders go into their living spaces and see all kinds of stuff. You can see not a cow, but boxes and boxes full of things that require that people work around them. And sometimes they make a room unusable because of the bulk, the amount of space that they take up. Indeed, no different than having a cow in the house. In the mind, the cow can represent an emotional burden, something that causes you anxiety, something that causes you a lot of mental energy to work around. It can be an obligation that is taking way more time and effort than you originally anticipated. In that case, it's a cow too. What about the goat? Well, the goat is an obstruction to your spiritual practice, whatever that happens to be. So, as an example, in the story, the goat is chewing up the sutra. That is a metaphorical way to talk about how our distractions, our material temptations can obstruct the path to spirituality and cultivation. You may, for instance, be cultivating the virtue of compassion, but then in a heated moment, you get angry and you snap at someone, and then later on, you justify it with some excuse. Oh, that person deserves it. He deserves the tongue lashing that I gave to him. Well, if so, then the goat has swallowed up the sutras that you read about compassion and clarity. So all of these things together represent the things that we need to get rid of, that we need to put out of the house. So the Tao is all about that. So I mentioned that these two lines, line 7 and line 8, are like the yin and yang symbol. The top line is the yang half, and the bottom line is the yin. The best way to live is to integrate both, the yin and yang, in harmonious balance. So that is why the Tao does not require poverty. It does not require that you be poor to cultivate. An important part of the Tao is to acquire things, resources, and wealth. Now, what about the other part? It's equally crucial to use what you acquire, to empty out your accumulation, but you must do so in a deliberate and intelligent way. It doesn't mean to give away all your belongings immediately. There is no such teaching in the Tao. So when you are able to make room for yourself, when you're able to make use of what you acquire, you maximize the functionality of your existence, the usefulness of your existence. You will be living a life that is meaningful and fulfilling. Ultimately, that's the Tao. That's what the Tao is all about. So I'm ready now to do the paraphrase for Tao Te Ching chapter 11. So we begin with the top section, which is about the 30 spokes in the wheel, the clay vessel, the container, and the room. So here's how I would like to paraphrase. People often assume having things is good and not having them is bad. However, when sages examine life, they find having and not having to be equally crucial. For example, the wheel of a chariot needs its spokes to be a wheel. At the same time, it also needs a hole in its center for the axle, so it can function as a wheel. Similarly, when you form clay into the shape of a bowl, you must also create the space in it as holding capacity, so it can function as a bowl. It is no different with a room. You can erect walls to enclose an area, but you must also have openings in the wall so you can access the space and have it function as a room. So the three examples, the wheel, the bowl, and the room. Now we get to the conclusion. That which exists is used to create benefit. That which is empty is used to create functionality. What might be a paraphrase for this? Here's what I would offer. These examples make it obvious that you need having for the resources in life and not having or emptiness to make that life useful and meaningful. Thus, living the Tao is all about the optimal balance between the two. Gotta have both. So there you go, the paraphrase for 11. And that brings us to the end of our discussion on chapter 11. I see that we have 5 more minutes, so we should jump to the end rather than to go into chapter 12. Thoughts inspired by chapter 11 of the Tao Te Ching. So, emphasize the emptiness. This is because we don't really need any help to emphasize the material aspects of life. As material beings living our lives in the material world, we have ample evidence of our senses to pursue material things. We don't really need any help in that, but we usually need some help to keep emptiness in mind. Now, in the material world, we can often be affected by how other people think. Other people will often think about fame and fortune, the pursuit of material things, rather than the spiritual. So, I would encourage everyone to break away from the common perspective. And here's a sort of a favorite phrase for me, to look through the eyes of the Tao, and the 3 steps that I would recommend. So number one, keep in mind, it's not just about having things, having power, having position, because not having can be just as important. So the story about the cow, the chicken, and the goat, that's meant to emphasize that particular point. Not having the room, having the space can be just as important. So an important kind of cultivation in the Tao is to practice discarding what you do not need. This is something that I am working on myself as well. Especially when it comes to things having to do with technology, my inclination is to hang on to my gadgets, for as long as possible. And I'm happy to report that I'm making a tiny bit of progress on that. Yesterday, I discarded a cell phone that has gotten really old and is completely broken beyond repair. Then, yeah, I'll get rid of it, but I should have gotten rid of it a long time ago, so I'm still working on that. That's number two, to sample different perspectives on minimalist living, to discard, to do with less. See if you can perhaps try the same ideas for yourself. Lastly, I would like to encourage everyone, and myself included, select a few things you can do without today and discard or donate. And let me know how it feels. I've just reported to you how it feels to discard a useless old cell phone. I gotta tell you, it feels great. I've created more space, more liberty, more freedom. Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架深鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架各位顶传十一鞠躬，斜翻一鞠躬。Well done, everybody. Thank you so much.